There's a spot in the hills of southeast Missouri where, on almost any warm weekend, you'll see little kids doing something that should terrify their parents. They're climbing on elephants. A whole herd of them. Giant, rounded, pink boulders, lined up end to end across the top of a hill, each one the size of a delivery truck, some the size of a house. From a distance, they really do look like a train of circus elephants standing nose to tail. Kids scramble up their backs and slide down their sides and picnic in their shade. And here's the thing almost nobody standing on those rocks realizes. You are standing on something older than nearly every living thing that has ever existed on this planet. And a piece of that exact same stone was hauled off this hill, dropped into the Mississippi River, and built into a bridge. A bridge that a real, live elephant had to walk across to prove it wouldn't fall down. I am not making that up. Let me tell you about elephant rocks. Start with how old this stone actually is. The granite in these boulders is Precambrian. The signs in the park will tell you 1.5 billion years old. The geologists with the radiometric dating equipment will argue it's more like 1.3 billion. And honestly, when the number is that big, the argument barely matters. Because either way, this rock formed more than 1 billion years ago. Let that sink in. 1 billion years ago, there were no dinosaurs. They were still 800 million years in the future. There were no trees, no fish, no insects, nothing on land at all. The most advanced life on Earth was pond scum, single cells drifting in the sea. This granite is roughly 3 times older than the very first animal with a skeleton. So where did it come from? Deep underground, a vast blob of molten rock, magma, pushed up into the crust of an ancient Missouri and then just stopped. And it sat there, buried, and it cooled, slowly, over an unimaginable stretch of time. And as magma cools slowly underground, it grows crystals, which is why, when you look at this granite up close, it's not smooth. It's a coarse, pink and gray salt and pepper of little interlocking crystals. Every one of those grains grew in the dark 1 billion years ago. But that just makes a slab of granite. It doesn't make elephants. So how did we get the herd? Here's the beautiful part. As that buried granite cooled and the continent slowly lifted it toward the surface, the rock cracked into a grid of enormous rectangular blocks, like sugar cubes stacked underground. And then water went to work. Water seeped down into every crack, and over millions of years it rotted away the granite along those cracks, and critically, it ate away fastest at the corners and edges of each block. Round and round, corner by corner, while the blocks were still buried in soil. And when erosion finally stripped that soil away and exposed them to the sky, the sharp underground cubes had been quietly rounded into giant, smooth boulders. Geologists have a lovely word for a pile of them like this. They call it a tor. Everybody else looked at them and saw elephants. The biggest one in the park has a name. They call him Dumbo. He stands 27 feet tall, 34 feet long, and he weighs about 680 tons, the patriarch of the herd. A single stone elephant heavier than a Boeing 747 sitting on a hilltop in Missouri, sculpted by nothing but water and time. Now, if you're a certain kind of person in the 1800s, you don't look at a mountain of flawless, gorgeous, dense pink granite and see a natural wonder. You see money. In 1869, they opened a quarry right next to these rocks, the oldest recorded commercial granite quarry in the state of Missouri. A whole town grew up around it, and they named it, appropriately, Graniteville. And they started cutting this billion-year-old stone into blocks and shipping it out to build a young, booming country. They branded it Missouri Red. And Missouri Red went everywhere. Between 1880 and 1900, this quarry cut millions of paving blocks that went straight into the streets and the riverfront levee of St. Louis. The columns on the front porch of the Missouri governor's mansion, this stone. Grand buildings, monuments, gravestones across the state, this hill. But the piece I want you to see is the bridge. In the 1870s, St. Louis had a problem. It was one of the biggest cities in America, sitting on the Mississippi, and there was no bridge across the river. Not one. The Mississippi at St. Louis was too wide, too deep, too violent, and everyone the city asked said the same thing. It can't be bridged. Then a self-taught engineer named James Buchanan Eads said, "Watch me." What Eads built between 1867 and 1874 is still considered one of the boldest things anyone has ever attempted in American engineering. He sank the foundations more than 100 feet down through the riverbed to bedrock. He made it, for the first time on this scale anywhere in the world, largely out of a brand new material called steel. Its central arch was the longest rigid span that had ever been built. And the great stone piers that hold the whole thing up out of the Mississippi were faced with granite cut from the Iron County quarries right here in the same district as Elephant Rocks. In fact, the man who owned the granite quarry that supplied the bridge, B. Gratz Brown, was a Missouri governor and senator who had personally helped secure the money to build it. So the same billion-year-old stone that makes these elephants is standing in the Mississippi River right now, holding up the Eads Bridge. The bridge was finished in 1874. President Ulysses S. Grant came out to dedicate it on the 4th of July. And there was just one problem left. Nobody trusted it. The public had never seen a steel bridge before. They were certain this thing was going to drop them all into the river. So how do you convince a terrified city that your impossible bridge is safe? On June 14, 1874, they led an elephant onto it, a circus elephant, out onto the deck of the brand new bridge in front of a crowd, because there was an old belief at the time that an elephant had some deep animal instinct, that an elephant would simply refuse to set foot on a structure that wasn't solid. So if the elephant walked across, the bridge was safe. And the elephant walked across, calm as anything. And then, a couple weeks later, to really drive it home, Eads ran 14 locomotives out onto the bridge at the same time. That bridge is still standing. Trains and cars still cross it 150 years later. So sit with the shape of this for a second. A herd of stone elephants sits on a hill in Missouri, boulders shaped over 1 billion years. And the very same stone cut out of that hill was carried down to St. Louis to build a bridge. And to prove that bridge would hold, they walked a living elephant across it. The elephants of stone and the elephant of flesh, meeting across 100 miles in 1 billion years over the same pink granite. Nobody planned that. Nobody could. It's just one of those impossible rhymes that history leaves lying around for anyone paying attention. So the next time you're in St. Louis and you drive over that old bridge, or the next time you watch a kid scramble laughing up the side of a giant pink boulder in a quiet Missouri park, put your hand flat on that stone. It's been waiting there for over 1 billion years. It held up a bridge, it held up an elephant, and it was here, cooling in the dark, long, long before anything alive was around to give it a name.